So first, I'm very happy to be here in the first Casual Connect in Tel Aviv. It's very exciting to be part of this great mobile gaming and mobile celebration first time. To introduce myself, my name is Daniel Neumann, and I'm the VP of Business Development and Strategy for a company called ClicksMob. For those of you who are less familiar with ClicksMob, we're a mobile performance platform helping global brands, game developers, app developers with their global user acquisition, as well as monetization for our different media partners around the world. I'm based here in Tel Aviv, together with the core operations, marketing, research, and development teams. And we have two more offices. One office in New York, and another recently opened headquarters in San Francisco, which we're very excited about. So today's session, in this 15, 20-minute presentation, we're going to look a little bit about what's going on in high level in the mobile gaming as well as user acquisition strategy. And I hope that I'll be able to give some of you some tips in how to approach your user acquisition strategy after finishing the development of your game. So, everybody's talking about it. Mobile gaming is really today in its golden age, right? Unlike in the past, where gaming back in the 80s or 90s was just for gamers, today everyone's playing. If it's my 94-year-old grandfather who lives in England, my parents, my uncles, everybody's on gaming, and the figures are astonishing. We're looking, just to give you some idea, we're looking at a roughly $30 billion industry in mobile, with a huge growth in the US, for example, a 16.5% growth last year in gaming revenue. When you look at the App Store, roughly a marketplace with 3 million apps on both Google Play and App Store, roughly 22% of the apps available are games. 85% of the top grossing apps are games. So again, we're looking at a very crowded marketplace. Now, what this means is, gaming is good, everybody's having fun, everybody's playing their games, but, it means that it brings some challenges to the industry. And indeed, we've seen some huge gaming giants, which we're fortunate enough to have some of them here visiting in Israel and Tel Aviv. These are companies like King and EA, Machine Zone, which are well-funded, huge companies that everyone's playing their game, and they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars in user acquisition. Back in February, in the Super Bowl, which is pretty much the biggest advertising or the biggest marketing celebration in the world, we had an amazing phenomenon where 3 game developers were showing their ads. We had Ucool, we had Machine Zone. So again, it says a lot about about where gaming is, how it's so conventional and how everybody's playing. But at the same time, this very crowded and flooded marketplace makes it a challenging environment for the smaller and medium game studios to stand out and to distribute the game, to get new users, and to make successful stories. And because of this crowded marketplace, user acquisition is such an important part and should be a very important part of their go-to-market of these game companies. So everybody's, we're all talking about it, and I'm meeting all the people here. We've been hearing some sessions about how the acquisition costs are rising, CPI costs are rising. Specifically, yesterday we were hearing stats like, specifically in social gaming, we're looking at even a $10 CPA for some of the titles, and indeed it's high, expensive. Some say, obviously, that organic users, organic traffic are have a higher LTV than the paid. But again, because of such a flooded industry, paid user acquisition is becoming important. Now, some of you will criticize paid user acquisition and say, organic is the best. But there aren't too many stories, or I would call it Cinderella stories, about companies that are pure organic. An interesting story or interesting company which I heard about recently is a Russian-based gaming company called Neki in Russia, which recently announced they were able to reach 250 million users pure organically. But again, it's rare. The fierce competition and the fact that we'll look deeper into retention and engagement, but again, scalability and driving massive user base to your games becomes important. In addition to that, attribution companies, attribution analytics abilities that are apparent in the market today, again, makes paid user acquisition much more easier, or help game developers to make smarter decision with their ad spend. Now, user acquisition is not easy, right? Because today, game developers should really approach their UA in a well-rounded strategy, pretty much doing a little bit of everything. There are many channels. We're looking at paid user acquisition, the main channels being Facebook, Google, Twitter, ad networks, performance platforms, ad networks, but it doesn't end there. There are many ways, many channels which game developers today should pursue when marketing their game. So things like social media and things like creating rich content and creating communities and being on video platforms and creating blogs. These are all very important channels when looking at, I would say, the holistic or the well-rounded strategy that game developers should pursue today. Now, it's not easy because today, gamers have choice. We're looking at an industry where at the App Store today, there are roughly 400,000 games on the App Store. And we're all, as gamers and users, not just for games, but in apps in general, we have zero patience. We all have ODD, right? We're texting our friends, we're speaking with our mother on Skype, we're playing a game, we're navigating to the next destination we want to go, and we're all browsing through apps in a very impatient way. And this is why, again, one of the biggest challenges for game developers is to keep their users within the game. Now, what are I put together some of the, I would say, growth hacking ways, or things that are sort of tips that, as a company that we do a lot of user acquisition for these companies, I thought would be interesting to share with you guys. So first, when looking at your paid acquisition, start with as many as partners as possible. Obviously, if you're a small company, you may not have too many resources. You can use some aggregators, but at the end of the day, start big. Start with as many channels as possible, and after you start, try to find the sweet spot. Try to find those who are delivering a better results for your campaigns. Use CPI as a baseline, but don't stop there. Explore additional models such as cost per action, cost per engagement, where you're not looking at the install level, which is really the first step of acquisition, but go beyond that. Optimize your funnel, optimize your traffic, looking at the specific media ID or the specific source of traffic, and not only that, but also on the specific placement of that ad and the specific ad unit. Know your metrics, and this is again very important. Some benchmarks in the industry and the gaming in general are looking at an average CPI of, I believe it was $2.96 and an average LTV of 1.96. This means that if you're just acquiring the users but you're not retaining them within your game, you're pretty much losing money. Now, know your metrics and the optimization efforts is all great, but another important aspect is that try to share as much data as possible. Share the data with your user acquisition partners so they can serve you better and they can deliver you with better results. And again, because the data is there, that will allow you to make better decisions. As I mentioned, retention and engagement are pretty much the biggest challenges today. When you look at your user base, roughly only 2.2% of your users, of your active user base, will actually perform some sort of an in-app purchase. And 50% of your revenues will come from 0.15% of your users, or what we call in industry as whales. If a player just downloaded the game, there's a 78% chance that after 30 days he will leave you. He will not be with you. So we're looking at pretty harsh data where retention and engagement and prolonging the lifespan of gamers is pretty much the big challenge. So what are some of the key things that you as game developers, I believe, should look at in order to, I would say, improve or in order to fight the big battle? First, focus on retention and engagement. I think as a game developer, as a gamer, first impression really matters. It's like a date. It's like a business meeting. You meet someone, and in many cases, the first 15 seconds or the first 1 minute will pretty much dictate what you think of that person and what you think about the business opportunity. So try to have that mindset when you develop your game. Communicate with your players. I think that's one of the key important things in order to keep engaging your users. There are many ways, such as some interesting presentations I heard today talking about push messages and what is exactly the optimal time of sending that push, whether it is after the user installed or after certain actions such as registration. But again, the key thing is to communicate with your player. Try to create a community where your players will tell their friends about it, because this is how you can keep being relevant or keep being entertaining. Use relevant messaging. Try to understand who are your target market and what message you need to send across in order to be relevant. Create engaging ads. This is part of the also related, obviously, to user acquisition. Try to create engaging ads in terms of animation, in terms of sound, video. Video is booming. We've heard a very interesting lecture previously by our friend Talsho from Supersonic, who was speaking about video. And indeed, video is a very important format in terms of user engagement, retention. Some studies show about video that video can increase the retention rate of users by 30%. Or basically, gamers or users who have watched a video have typically a higher retention rate by 30%. Soft launch. Soft launching is important in a sense that it's kind of your chance as a game developer to have a close group of a test group of users who are checking out your game, checking the game funnel, better understand as a developer how your players are routing between the different screens, between the different games. And before you start massively spending in user acquisition, you should definitely start with a soft launch. Now, many studios here are talking about that they're reaching typically they're reaching tier 1 countries, English language speaking countries, US as obviously the big market. Specifically from my experience, based upon my experience with some of our companies, typically Canada, Australia were used to be markets where we're kind of used for small test groups, for soft launch. However, recently they've become a bit expensive in terms of CPI, but there are countries out there which typically in their user behavior are somewhat similar to the Western player. These are countries such as the Netherlands, Hong Kong, which in terms of the user behavior and what you're trying to learn about your user base, you may be able to achieve it there. And if you're looking to test your game, looking more into scale, I would definitely, we're seeing a good success in countries like India and the Philippines, which are very price efficient in terms of CPI. And if you're looking for a closer control group, or a bigger control group, I would recommend looking at these markets. In general, and this is not specifically speaking about soft launch, but I can say from my personal experience and from what we see at ClicksMob, post-launch, the emerging markets are markets, India, for example, which are very interesting markets. Again, monetization in India, for example, is still relatively challenging, primarily due to the fact that credit cards and payment methods are less developed. But if you're looking at, the long run, Q2, Q3 of next year, I would definitely not ignore these emerging markets. To summarize, mobile gaming and user acquisition is pretty much growing hand in hand, and effective user acquisition can be a key success factor to successfully launch your game. Fortunately enough, there are today in the market sufficient resources, both in terms of media as well as tracking and attribution companies, to help game developers to launch their games successfully in a very competitive and flooded market. In terms of the user acquisition channels, there's no easy formula. There has to be a well-rounded strategy of both online, offline, paid, organic, so there has to be a balance and there has to be a mix. Companies in the ecosystem can help game developers to focus at the end of the day what they do best, which is developing great games, great entertainment, and helping with their user acquisition strategy to promote growth. I hope I was able to kind of give you a bit of an overview on how to approach your user acquisition, how to look at it, what's important, what's trending, and I'm going to be here in the next 2 days, so if there are any questions, feel free to ping me. I'm at the booth, and I'll be happy to hear, if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.